My parents said I'd never be as good as my brother. Now I'm on TV and he's living in our childhood basement. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and for most of my life I was just the other son. My family's world revolved around my older brother, Jason. He was the golden child. Tall, confident, athletic. Everything my father believed a real man should be. From the outside, we looked like the perfect family. 2 sons, a successful father, a graceful mother, and a house that always smelled faintly of polished wood and control. But behind those walls, there was a hierarchy, and I was firmly at the bottom. I remember bringing home my first report card with straight A's. My father barely glanced at it before saying, "Jason got those in middle school." My mom smiled, distracted while setting the table. Jason walked in with a basketball trophy, and suddenly, my report card might as well have been invisible. He got steak for dinner that night. I got silence. At family gatherings, I was the quiet one. Relatives would pinch my cheek and say, "Not everyone can be outgoing like Jason," as if it were a flaw I needed to fix. Even when I tried to shine, winning a writing contest or helping Dad with his office presentation, the praise always circled back to Jason. "Maybe your brother inspired you," they'd say, laughing. The worst part wasn't the favoritism, it was the gaslighting. When I'd bring it up, Mom would sigh, "Don't be dramatic. We love you equally, but love shouldn't feel like invisibility. It shouldn't feel like every achievement needs to be filtered through someone else's shadow." By the time I hit high school, I stopped trying to compete. I laughed at their jokes, nodded at their comparisons, and told myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. I spent my childhood learning how to exist quietly beside perfection. If childhood was about being compared, my teenage years were about being ignored. By the time I turned 16, I'd learned exactly how to disappear. Jason was the star of every school event. The varsity captain, the debate champion, the guy teachers adored and girls wrote notes to. I was the one holding the camera, clapping from the crowd. My father used to joke, "Every king needs an audience," and my mother would smile like it was endearing. I laughed too because pretending it didn't hurt was easier than fighting a losing battle. At home, dinners became performance reviews. Jason would brag about his latest win, and my father would nod proudly, talking about his bright future. When it was my turn to speak, my mother would interrupt. "Oh, honey, did you finish that essay?" The kind of question that sounded supportive but carried no interest in the answer. I remember once saying I wanted to study film production. My father scoffed. "You want to make movies while your brother builds empires?" The room went quiet, except for Jason's chuckle. So, I buried my interests and worked part-time jobs to save money for college, quietly, stubbornly. My parents never asked what I did after school, but they always asked about Jason's training schedule. He'd tell stories about his teammates or his dating life, and they'd hang on every word. I'd sometimes wonder if they even noticed when I wasn't home. One night I overheard my mom on the phone with a relative. She said, "Jason's doing so well, and our younger ones, he's good too, just quiet, like that was my whole identity." That night I sat in the dark, staring at my reflection and wondering when I became background noise in my own life. I didn't know it yet, but leaving home would be the only way to finally be seen. Leaving home didn't feel brave. It felt like survival. When I got accepted into a small media college 3 hours away, my father barely looked up from his newspaper. "Film school?" he muttered. "So you'll waste money learning to play with cameras?" My mom didn't defend me. She just asked if Jason could borrow my car for the weekend. That was her way of saying goodbye. I packed my bags quietly. No farewell dinner. No hugs, no, "We're proud of you." I remember standing in my childhood room, staring at the blank spot on the wall where my old certificates used to hang. Mom had taken them down years ago to make room for Jason's medals. It hit me that I wasn't just leaving the house. I was leaving behind a version of myself that had never been enough. College was messy and freeing. I shared a tiny dorm with 2 guys who smelled like instant noodles and ambition. No one cared who my brother was. I worked late shifts at a grocery store and edited short films in the early mornings. For the first time, people noticed my work. My professors, classmates, even strangers online who watched my student documentaries. I'd call home sometimes out of habit. My father always asked, "You getting any real job offers yet?" Jason's name slipped into every conversation. "Your brother just bought a car. Your brother's girlfriend just graduated law." I learned to stop trying to share my wins. Still, I felt something new growing inside me: independence. I was broke, exhausted, and unappreciated, but I was free. Every camera click, every sleepless night, every cheap meal. It all felt like proof that I existed beyond their expectations. For once, I wasn't Jason's brother. I was just me. And for the first time in my life, that was enough. I didn't realize how heavy my parents' voices were until I stopped hearing them. By my mid-20s, I was working at a small local TV station as a production assistant, the kind of job that paid almost nothing but gave me purpose. My mornings smelled like burnt coffee and buzzing studio lights. I'd haul cables, manage chaotic schedules, and quietly observe people who actually believed in creativity. Nobody there knew about my family. Nobody compared me to anyone. It was the kind of peace I never thought I'd have. Jason, meanwhile, had graduated with a business degree and was struggling to pass his bar exams. He'd moved back home to focus, which meant living rent-free and posting inspirational quotes online. My parents never said a bad word about it. To them, Jason was just between chapters. When they called me, they'd ask, "Do you think your brother's stressed?" Not, "How are you doing?" Just, "How's Jason?" Then, one evening, I saw something surreal. My name scrolling in the end credits of a regional TV program. It was just a 2-second credit. Assistant producer, Daniel. But I stood in front of that flickering screen for 10 minutes, unable to breathe. I'd finally left a mark that nobody could take away. I sent my parents a photo of the screen, hoping maybe they'd feel a spark of pride. My dad replied, "You know, Jason was thinking of starting a podcast. Maybe you could help him get exposure." My stomach dropped. Even in my small success, I was just a tool for Jason's potential. But that night, as I walked home under the streetlights, something shifted. For the first time, their approval didn't matter. The world hadn't ended without it. And for the first time in my life, I didn't need to be seen by them to feel real. It had been almost 2 years since I'd last seen Jason when his name suddenly popped up on my phone. "Hey, little bro." His voice came through smooth as ever. "Heard you're doing the TV thing now. Proud of you, man." The words felt wrong in his mouth. Too warm, too careful. Jason had never called me bro before. He said he wanted to grab lunch, just to catch up. Against my better judgment, I agreed. Some part of me still wanted a real relationship with him, one not built on comparisons. We met at a trendy cafe downtown, the kind he used to mock me for liking. He looked good, new haircut, expensive jacket, that easy charm he'd always had. "So," he said between bites, "what's it like working in television? You meet anyone famous?" He leaned in like he cared, but his eyes flicked to the watch on my wrist, the phone I placed on the table. He was measuring me. I told him I was doing okay. Not rich, but steady. He grinned. "Man, Dad would be proud. You finally made something of yourself." The word finally hit like a slap. Still, I smiled. We talked about small things, and for a moment it almost felt like brotherhood. Almost. 2 weeks later, I got a call from my mom, voice bubbling with excitement. "Jason told us how you said he inspired you, that his hard work pushed you to follow your dreams." Isn't that sweet? My stomach twisted. That conversation never happened. He'd turned my progress into his legacy. Again. That night, I sat in my dark apartment staring at my phone. Jason's text blinked at the top of the screen. "Dinner at the house this Sunday? Mom's making your favorite." I should have ignored it, but I didn't. And that decision would remind me just how easily old wounds reopen. By the time I turned 27, I had finally carved out something real. I'd been promoted to segment producer on the TV show. Long hours, stressful deadlines, but work that mattered. I thrived on it. I thrived because it was mine, not borrowed or handed down. But home. Home was a different story. Jason had moved back in, permanently this time, citing a fresh start. My parents welcomed him with open arms, never asking how my work was going. At the last family dinner, Jason leaned back in the living room chair, smirking. "So you're on TV now? Big shots, huh?" I forced a smile. "Yeah," I said quietly, trying to keep my tone neutral. "It's going well." "Guess it runs in the family," Jason said, laughing. My father nodded, proud. I swallowed my pride and finished my food in silence. Every bite tasted like bitterness, and every laugh from them felt like a spotlight on everything I'd endured. Later that night, alone in my apartment, I replayed the conversation. Jason had subtly accused me of stealing his thunder without even touching the subject directly. My parents were complicit, smirking at my restraint, blind to the quiet humiliation they were inflicting. I called my best friend. "It's insane," I whispered into the phone. "I work my ass off, and it's never enough. He's back, living off them, and somehow I'm the bad guy for having a life? Sounds like your parents still have their favorites," my friend said. "Maybe it's time you stop letting them define your worth." I hung up, staring at the ceiling. The anger simmered quietly, a storm waiting to break. I realized in that moment, all my life I'd let them dictate my value. All my life I'd let Jason overshadow me. And for the first time, I thought about standing up. Not just for me, but for the life I'd built without them. But I had no idea how much more twisted this family dynamic could get. I thought I knew my family. I thought I understood their favoritism, their hypocrisy. I was wrong. It started with a routine credit check. My bank called, asking about a mysterious loan I supposedly co-signed. Confused, I dug through my paperwork, and then I saw it. A loan for Jason's failed business venture, co-signed in my name without my knowledge. My heart sank. My parents had signed my name, taken my credit, and given him money. Again. I felt dizzy, sick, betrayed in a way that cut deeper than childhood comparisons ever had. I stormed over to my parents' house, holding the papers like evidence of my lifelong invisibility. "What the hell is this?" I shouted. My father waved a hand dismissively. "It's for your brother. You're doing well, right? No need to worry." My mother added, "He's family. Don't be dramatic. You've always been so sensitive." The words felt like knives twisting in my chest. Jason stood in the background, feigning innocence. "It's just business," he said casually. "Thought you'd be proud I'm taking risks." I wanted to scream. "Proud? You ruined my credit, my future, for your mistakes." I left that night shaking, driving aimlessly while the city lights blurred into streaks of guilt and rage. My promotion at the TV station, the long hours, the sacrifices, none of it mattered in their eyes. They still favored him, even at my expense. That night, alone in my apartment, I realized something chilling. I wasn't just overshadowed. I was being used. My parents had weaponized me against myself for Jason's benefit. Every achievement, every struggle, every sacrifice. It could be undermined with a single signature, and yet, despite everything, a fire started inside me. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. I didn't know it then, but this betrayal would become the catalyst that changed everything. That week was a blur of exhaustion, anger, and disbelief. The loan disaster ruined my credit. I got a notice from my landlord. My apartment rent was overdue. The promotion at work I'd been counting on to finally move into a better space was put on hold. The paperwork caught in HR limbo, thanks to an unexpected audit. Every piece of stability I'd fought for was crumbling. I felt like I was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring at the jagged rocks below. Meanwhile, Jason posted vacation photos online, him sipping cocktails in Bali, my parents commenting, "So proud of you." I scrolled through, heart hammering, and I realized just how absurd life had become. The brother who had never worked a day in his life, who had squandered opportunities, who had relied on my parents' constant rescue. He was thriving while I was floundering. I remember sitting on my threadbare couch, hands gripping my knees, staring at the peeling paint of the wall. I felt small, invisible, trapped in a life that wasn't fair. Thoughts swirled in my head. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was never meant to shine. Maybe I'm just nothing. The isolation was suffocating. I stopped answering calls from friends. I ignored emails from potential collaborators. Even my dreams felt heavy, like chains pulling me under. I couldn't see a way out, and in that moment, lying in the dim glow of my laptop screen, I realized something terrifying. The people I thought would always love me, my family, had weaponized me. My success, my independence, my very existence had been measured against Jason, and according to their scale, I'd failed. I closed my eyes, exhausted, broken, wondering if I'd ever crawl out of the shadow that had been cast over me since birth. But even in that darkness, somewhere deep inside, a spark was waiting. I spent weeks in silence after hitting rock bottom, but something shifted. I realized that if I waited for anyone, my parents, Jason, or even luck, I'd never move forward. The only person I could count on was me. I threw myself into work like never before. Every late night, every extra script I wrote, every minor edit on a segment became a small rebellion against the family that had tried to keep me invisible. I started pitching ideas for a human interest documentary series, pulling stories from people whose struggles mirrored my own. Invisible, overlooked, and underestimated. My bosses noticed. My ideas resonated. Slowly, doors that had felt permanently closed began to open. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A senior producer asked me to helm a full episode for the network. The stakes were high. I spent days writing, rewriting, editing, obsessing over every detail. The first cut premiered, and the response was overwhelming. Viewers were connecting, commenting, sharing, and praising the authenticity. I watched the numbers climb from my apartment, the hum of my old fridge in the background, the smell of takeout lingering in the air. I had created something that mattered. For the first time in years, the world saw me. Not as Jason's shadow, not as the quiet one, but as Daniel, the storyteller. My parents finally noticed, too. My phone rang constantly with messages. "We're so proud." "Congratulations." Jason even texted a thinly veiled request to collaborate. But I didn't answer, not yet. Not until I knew exactly how I wanted this story to end. For the first time, success didn't feel hollow. It felt like power. Quiet, steady, and mine. And as I sat back in my chair, watching the first comments come in, I realized this wasn't just about proving them wrong. This was about reclaiming me. But I had no idea how Jason and my parents would react when they realized I had finally outgrown their control. It started quietly, almost innocently, but the shift in power was undeniable. My face began appearing on local news segments and social media pages. Friends, former classmates, even distant relatives started reaching out, congratulating me. The same parents who once dismissed my achievements were suddenly calling non-stop. "We saw your segment today." My mother gushed. "Jason told us all about it, and we're so proud of you." My father left voice messages that dripped with reluctant admiration. Their favorite son, the golden child, had become the background noise in their own house. Jason's texts came too, slyly hinting at financial trouble, asking for advice, even subtly requesting help on new projects. I read them, smiling quietly to myself. Gone was the cocky brother who once mocked me at the dinner table. Now he was the one trying to crawl into my world, looking for scraps. At work, I felt the difference. Colleagues treated me with respect. My ideas were valued. My segments were being promoted. The spark that had been smothered for years had grown into a steady flame. I was no longer invisible. I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. One evening, while scrolling through my phone, I saw it clearly. My parents' panic, Jason's thinly veiled desperation, the recalibration of who held the power. They were finally seeing what I had always been, capable, independent, unstoppable. I sent a simple reply to Jason's latest message. Hope things work out. Nothing more. Polite, distant, detached. He couldn't manipulate me this time. I had the upper hand, and in that quiet assertion, I felt the first true taste of satisfaction. I wasn't just succeeding for myself anymore. I was witnessing the quiet unraveling of the hierarchy that had oppressed me for decades. But I knew the story wasn't over. Not yet. There was one final confrontation, one last look at where Jason had ended up, that would bring everything full circle. Months later, I decided to go home, not to beg for approval or reconcile, but to see the aftermath of all the choices my family had made. The house felt smaller somehow, heavier. Jason's old room had been reduced to a cluttered mess, empty pizza boxes, tangled cords, a half-broken desk under a dim lamp. The golden child who had once received accolades, admiration, and endless support was now living in the basement, trapped in a cycle of his own making. My parents hovered nervously, their smiles forced, their voices too loud. It was like they were trying to convince themselves that everything was fine, even as the truth stared them in the face. Jason slouched in a worn-out chair, eyes darting nervously when I walked in. For the first time, the arrogance, the charm, the effortless superiority, all gone. He finally spoke, voice small. I guess you were always stronger than me." I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at him, taking in the irony. All those years of comparison, manipulation, and favoritism, and now the scales had shifted entirely. I wasn't gloating. I wasn't laughing. I was quiet, observing the consequences of a life built on entitlement rather than effort. My parents tried to intervene, to soften the moment with words of reassurance, but it felt hollow. They had lost their grip. The hierarchy they'd imposed for decades had collapsed under the weight of truth. I left the basement that day with a strange mix of satisfaction and sadness. Satisfaction that the invisible sun had finally been seen. Sadness for a brother who had everything handed to him and wasted it. The house, once a place of quiet humiliation for me, felt empty, hollow, and finally mine in spirit. And as I stepped out into the cool evening air, I realized that the story wasn't about revenge. It was about witnessing the quiet reckoning, seeing the truth laid bare, and understanding that some victories are felt silently, deep inside, long after the world has moved on. I never thought I'd feel peace with my family. But here I am. After the basement revelation, I moved forward without looking back. My career soared. Primetime segments, national recognition, and a platform to tell stories like mine. Overlooked, undervalued, and underestimated. The TV studio became my sanctuary, the place where I was seen for my work, my ideas, and most importantly, myself. I realized that the approval I had craved for decades wasn't theirs to give. It was mine to claim. I visited my old neighborhood once, walking past the house where I grew up. The memories were sharp. Jason's laughter echoing through the halls, my father's dismissive comments, my mother's distracted smiles. But I didn't feel anger anymore. I felt calm. The little boy who had spent years shrinking to exist quietly beside perfection was gone. In his place stood someone who had built his own life, piece by piece, on his own terms. I've learned that success isn't always about proving someone wrong. Sometimes it's about proving to yourself that you can thrive despite their judgment. Jason and my parents remain in their world, clinging to old hierarchies and false narratives. And that's okay. I've outgrown it all. Sitting in my office late at night, the city lights reflecting in the window, I think about the years I wasted seeking validation from people who couldn't give it. I don't regret the struggle. It shaped me. Every insult, every dismissal, every stolen opportunity became fuel. I whispered to myself, softly. They said I'd never be as good as my brother. They were wrong, and for the first time I feel complete. Not because they finally see me. Not because Jason has fallen behind, but because I've finally claimed my own story, my own worth, and my own peace. I am no longer the other son. I am me.